In 1874, a forgotten child painted a scene so vivid, so haunting, it seemed impossible. Yet, years later, every detail came true, down to the smallest shadow. I'm diving into this chilling mystery, piecing together the clues of a story that defies time. Stick with me as I uncover how a child's forgotten art became a prophecy. I first heard about the painting in an old, dusty archive, tucked away in a small-town library. It was 1874, and a child, barely 10, had created something extraordinary. The canvas was small, unassuming, but the details were striking. A river curved through a valley, framed by jagged cliffs. A lone figure stood on a bridge, cloaked in shadow. The colors were bold, too bold for a child, some said. Locals whispered about it, calling it unnatural. No one knew the child's name, only that they were an orphan. The painting was stored away, forgotten by most. But I couldn't shake the feeling it held a secret. Something about it felt alive. I needed to know more. The librarian who showed me the painting was hesitant, her hands trembling slightly. She said it had been locked in a vault for decades. The canvas was brittle, but the scene was untouched by time. The river glistened with an eerie realism. The cliffs seemed to loom over me as I stared. The figure on the bridge felt like it was watching. I asked for records about the child, but there were none. No birth certificate, no family history, nothing. It was as if the child never existed outside this painting. Yet the work was signed with a single initial, E. That was my first clue. I began researching the town's history, digging through old newspapers. In 1874, the town was a quiet farming community, nothing remarkable. But one article caught my eye, a brief mention of a fire. It destroyed an orphanage on the outskirts that same year. No names of the children were listed, but the timing felt too close. Could E have been one of them? The article described a survivor, a child who vanished after the blaze. I felt a chill imagining them painting this scene, before it all burned. The mystery was growing. The painting's details gnawed at me. Every stroke seemed deliberate. The river's curve matched a local landmark, though it was miles away. The cliffs, too, resembled a nearby range, but not exactly. It was as if the child had painted a future version of the landscape. I visited the river, standing where the bridge in the painting would be. There was no bridge there now, not in 2025, nor in 1874, but the view felt eerily familiar. I took photos, comparing them to the canvas. The similarities were uncanny. Back at the library, I found a map from the 1890s. It showed a bridge being planned near the river, a bridge that wasn't built until 1901. The painting's bridge matched its design perfectly. How could a child in 1874 know this? I started to wonder if the painting wasn't just art, but a vision. The figure on the bridge haunted me most. Who were they? Why were they there? The answers felt just out of reach, pulling me deeper. I tracked down a historian who specialized in the region. She was skeptical but intrigued when I showed her the painting. She pointed out the figure's cloak, noting its style was uncommon for 1874. It resembled clothing from decades later, around the early 1900s. This only deepened the mystery. Could the child have seen the future? The historian mentioned local legends of a gifted child, dismissed as folklore. I wasn't so sure it was just a story anymore. The painting's colors were another puzzle. The child used pigments that shouldn't have existed in 1874. Some shades, like the vibrant blues, were synthetic, invented years later. I consulted an art restorer, who confirmed the anomaly. The canvas itself was old, but the paints were impossible for the time. It was as if the child had access to materials from the future. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this a hoax? Or something far stranger? I couldn't stop thinking about the figure on the bridge. In the painting, they held something, a small object, glinting faintly. It was too vague to identify, but it felt significant. I zoomed in on a high-resolution scan of the canvas. The object looked like a watch, but watches in 1874 were bulkier. This one was sleek, modern, like something from the 20th century. My heart pounded as I realized the implications. I started interviewing locals, hoping for any scraps of lore. An elderly man recalled his great-grandfather mentioning a ghost child who painted. He said the child was shunned, called cursed for their visions. The story went that their paintings predicted disasters. I asked if any other work survived, but he shook his head. The fire had destroyed everything, except this one canvas. It was starting to feel like fate that I found it. The more I learned, the more questions I had. Why was this painting spared? Who was it? I felt like I was chasing a ghost across time. The scene in the painting was so specific, so detailed, it couldn't be coincidence. I decided to focus on the bridge's construction in 1901. Maybe the answers lay there. I was starting to believe this child saw something no one else could, a glimpse of the future. I dug into records about the bridge's construction, buried in county archives. The bridge was built in 1901, just as the map suggested. But there was more. A newspaper from that year described a tragedy. A worker died during construction, falling from the incomplete structure. His description matched the figure in the painting, a man in a dark cloak. My hands shook as I read the article. The painting was starting to feel like a warning from 1874. The worker's name was Edward, a detail that stopped me cold. Could he be? No, the timeline didn't fit. He was an adult in 1901. But the coincidence was too stark. I found a photo of the bridge from 1902, just after it was finished. The cliffs, the river, the bridge itself. It was the painting, down to the smallest detail. I felt like I was staring into the child's mind. I started wondering about the child's life. What drove them to paint this? Were they afraid? Excited? I imagined them alone, brush in hand, capturing a vision they couldn't explain. The orphanage fire kept coming back to me. I found a list of children who lived there in 1874. One name stood out, Eliza. Could she be? There was no record of her after the fire. She was a ghost, just like the painting. The painting's realism kept pulling me in. The shadows on the cliffs were perfect, matching the sunrise light in my photos. I visited the river at dawn, watching the light play across the landscape. It was like stepping into the canvas. I felt a connection to the child, as if they were speaking to me through their work. But what were they trying to say? Why this scene? Why this moment? I contacted a paranormal researcher, desperate for answers. She suggested the child might have been clairvoyant, seeing events years ahead. She'd heard of similar cases, children with unexplained gifts. The painting could be a snapshot of a vision, she said. I was skeptical, but the evidence was mounting. The bridge, the cloak, the watch. It all pointed to something beyond normal. I was starting to believe in the impossible. I went back to the painting, studying it under different lights. In certain angles, the figure's face seemed clearer, almost mournful. It was subtle, but it gave me chills. The child had painted grief into the scene, as if they knew the tragedy coming. I couldn't help but feel for them, a child carrying such a heavy burden. I needed to know what happened to them. The historian I'd spoken to reached out with new information. She'd found a journal from a town doctor in 1874. It mentioned a child at the orphanage, gifted but troubled. The doctor described them as seeing things that haven't happened. The journal didn't name the child, but it felt like another piece of the puzzle. I pictured Eliza, alone with her visions, painting to make sense of them. I started cross-referencing dates and events. The bridge's construction in 1901 wasn't the only match. A flood in 1910 reshaped the river, just as the painting showed. The cliffs eroded over decades, aligning with the child's jagged lines. It was as if the painting captured a century of changes. I felt like I was unraveling time itself, guided by a child's brushstrokes. The object in the figure's hand kept nagging at me. I consulted a watch expert, showing them the scan. They confirmed it resembled a pocket watch from the 1920s, not 1874. This was another impossible detail. The child had painted objects, people, and places that didn't exist yet. I started to wonder if they were painting their own future, or someone else's. I couldn't let go of Eliza. I imagined her escaping the fire, carrying her painting, her only possession. Did she know what it meant? Did she try to warn anyone? The lack of records frustrated me, but it also fueled my obsession. I felt like I was honoring her by chasing this truth. Her painting was her voice, and I was listening. I decided to visit the site of the old orphanage, now just a field. Standing there, I felt a weight, like the past was watching. I wondered if Eliza stood in this same spot, painting her vision. The fire had erased her existence, but not her work. The painting was her legacy, a message across time. I was determined to understand it fully. The grass was overgrown, but I could almost see the orphanage's outline. I closed my eyes, imagining Eliza's small hands gripping a brush. The air felt heavy with unspoken stories. What had she seen? Why this painting? I needed to dig deeper. I found a descendant of the bridge's architect in a nearby town. He was an old man, full of stories about his great-grandfather's work. I showed him a photo of the painting, and his eyes widened. He recognized the bridge instantly, but the figure puzzled him. He said his great-grandfather kept a journal, mentioning a strange child who visited the construction site. The child had warned about a falling man before vanishing. Could that have been Eliza? The journal was lost, but the story felt like another thread connecting her to the painting. Back at the library, I found a reference to a traveling artist in 1874. He'd passed through the town, teaching children at the orphanage. Could he have taught Eliza to paint? His name was scratched out in the records, but his influence lingered. The article described him as eccentric, obsessed with visions and dreams. I wondered if he recognized something special in Eliza, encouraging her to capture her visions. The painting skill suggested she'd had some training. This artist might have been her only ally. The painting's details kept revealing new layers. I noticed tiny scratches near the cliffs, almost like hidden symbols. Under a magnifying glass, they looked like initials, Yell Again, etched faintly. Was Eliza leaving clues? The scratches were deliberate, a secret only she knew. I felt like she was guiding me, urging me to keep searching. The painting wasn't just a scene. It was a map to her truth. I spent hours staring, lost in its depths. I contacted a geologist to analyze the cliffs in the painting. She confirmed they matched the local range, but their eroded shape fit the 1920s, not 1874. This was another impossible detail. Eliza had painted the landscape as it would become, decades later. The geologist was baffled, suggesting I look into seismic records. I found a minor earthquake in 1915 that reshaped the cliffs. The painting predicted it perfectly. My mind spun with the implications. The figure on the bridge haunted me more each day. I started dreaming about it, standing alone in the mist. In my dreams, the figure turned, but their face was always blurred. I woke up feeling like Eliza was trying to tell me something. I returned to the painting, noticing the shadow under the bridge. It wasn't just a shadow. It hinted at a second figure, barely visible. Was this another prophecy? Another tragedy? I needed to know who they were. I found a 1901 coroner's report about the bridge worker's death. His name was Edward Langley Yell. The coincidence sent chills down my spine. The report described him clutching a pocket watch when he fell. It matched the object in the painting exactly. I couldn't believe it. Eliza had painted Edward's final moment, years before it happened. But why him? Was he connected to her somehow? The mystery was tightening around me. I started researching Edward Langley's life. He was a drifter, arriving in town just before the bridge's construction. No family, no clear past, just like Eliza. I found a photo of him in an old newspaper. His cloak matched the painting's figure perfectly. I felt like I was staring at a ghost. Could Eliza have known him? Maybe she saw him in her visions, a man doomed to fall. The painting felt more like a warning than ever. I went back to the river, standing where the bridge now stood. It was dusk, and the light matched the painting's eerie glow. I felt Eliza's presence, like she was watching me. I whispered her name, half expecting an answer. The wind carried a faint rustle, but nothing more. I took out my notebook, sketching the scene as it looked now. It was identical to her work. I felt a surge of purpose. This was her story, and I was telling it. The paranormal researcher called me with a new theory. She believed Eliza might have been a time seer, someone who glimpsed moments across decades. It sounded far-fetched, but the evidence was undeniable. The painting predicted the bridge, the flood, the cliffs, Edward's death, all with chilling accuracy. The researcher suggested Eliza's gift isolated her, making her an outcast. I pictured her alone, painting to cope with visions no one believed. My heart ached for her. I found a small museum nearby with artifacts from the 1874 fire. Among them was a child's sketchbook, singed but intact. The pages were filled with drawings, rivers, cliffs, bridges. The style matched the painting perfectly. There was no name, but I knew it was Eliza's. One sketch showed a figure falling from a bridge, a watch glinting in their hand. My breath caught. This was proof. She'd seen it all. The sketchbook had a final page, torn but legible. It described a dream. I see a man on a bridge, and he falls. The river takes him. I try to warn, but no one listens. The words were in a child's shaky handwriting. I felt tears prick my eyes. Eliza had tried to save Edward, but her gift was a curse. The sketchbook was her voice, preserved despite the fire. I clutched it, feeling closer to her than ever. I decided to honor Eliza by sharing her story. I contacted a local paper, pitching an article about the painting. They were skeptical but agreed to run it. I described the child, the fire, the visions, the bridge. I included photos of the painting and the sketchbook. The response was overwhelming. Readers were captivated. Some claimed to have seen similar visions. Eliza's story was coming alive again, just as her painting had. The painting is now on display in the museum, next to Eliza's sketchbook. Visitors stare, whispering about the child who saw the future. I visit often, feeling her presence in the canvas. The figure on the bridge seems to watch me, a silent guardian of her legacy. I've started a blog to document my findings, hoping to uncover more about Eliza. Her story isn't over, it's just beginning. I'm determined to find every piece of her truth. If you're as fascinated by this mystery as I am, join me on this journey. Subscribe to my channel for updates on Eliza's story and other forgotten histories. Together, we can uncover the secrets hidden in time. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep digging into the past. Who knows what other truths are waiting to be found? This story is far from over. Subscribe to my channel to follow my search for Eliza's truth and other mysteries lost to time. Hit the button, join the journey, and let's uncover the impossible together.